So, ladies and gentlemen, we are just on time to move to our second panel discussion. And I would like to give a little brief, which is very close to my heart when I talk of this panel discussion. It says sustainability is a social goal about the ability of people to coexist. Now, keeping that thought in mind, what our August panel is here to discuss today is, will renewed sustainability goals drive HR back to basics? I would like to invite our esteemed guests to be a part of this interesting and thought-provoking discussion. However, before that, let me begin with a short introduction. Ms. Mohana, MD. Mohana is the Chief People and Culture Officer at BetterPlace, Asia's largest SaaS and frontline workforce management platform. Mohana comes with over 15 years of experience in BFSI and IT sectors. She has led large-scale talent transformations in companies like SAP, Fidelity Investments, and Standard Chartered Bank's Global Business Services. Mohana believes that in a changing global work order, it is important to see employees as more than just resources, but as enablers. Hence, at BetterPlace, she would be focusing on building a participative, inclusive culture, which would act as a catalyst to BetterPlace's journey of growth. She would be leading initiatives to build a common currency of trust, innovation, and oneness across BetterPlace employees working out in different geographies. Prior to joining BetterPlace, Mohana brought about innovative change in the workplace to help employees adapt to the changing dynamics of the world. As always, a pleasure to see you, Mohana, and a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Nilakshi, and a pleasure to be here with the fellow panelists and to all our audience today. Thank you for taking time to join us.
Moving on to our next panelist, PK, as I like calling him, or Mr. P. Padmakumar, Executive Director, Human Resources and CSR, Head Saint-Gobain India Private Limited. Over the last 19 years, PK is responsible for driving change, in management through proactive industrial relations, restructuring people in the organization for a better future. He has brought about diverse experiences in academics and research in HR. He's overseen mergers and acquisitions of organizations and helped people build people capability and leadership. He has an active involvement in EFSI, EFI, CII, and the Board of Apprenticeship. He has various awards and accolades to his credit for his remarkable contribution in the area of CSR. A very warm welcome to you, PK. Really look forward to some really enriching conversation with you.
Thank you, Nilachi. Thank you to all the panel members.
I'm so happy to see Vijay. Vijay, welcome. Vijay Yalamanchili is the founder of Keka, an HR automation service company that offers reliable and efficient HR software to SME businesses. Besides understanding and leveraging current business trends and industry insights, Vijay also looks after the growth and management of the organization. Also, at the helm of tech-led customer-centric brand, he spearheads product design and strategizes product-led development. Vijay holds a BTech degree in Electronics and Communications from Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University of Hyderabad and an MS degree in Computer Science from the University of Delaware, USA. Vijay, we understand that you have made it despite of difficulties at your end, and I can't tell you how thankful we are for you.
My pleasure. Thanks for the warm welcome.
Moving to last, but definitely not the least, our firebrand moderator, Nimisha Rana Pathak. Nimisha is the HR country head for Alvarez and Marsal India Limited. She and her team are responsible for designing and driving initiatives for A&M India that makes it a state-of-the-art firm with evolved and sustainable people organization. Prior to her current role, Nimisha was the HR business head for the Boston Consulting Group India. And before that, she worked with Accenture Consulting for a span of 7 years. Her 16 years of HR experience across various consulting firms has given her a unique perspective about this industry and has helped her carving the most appropriate people agenda for the firms. During her tenure at A&M India, Nimisha has seen the headcount grow to double, and the human resource function has developed a holistic approach to deliver people solutions. Nimisha comes with an undying zeal and passion for her job and is known to possess an energy that is infectious and obvious. A hearty welcome, and over to you, Nimisha.
Thank you so much, Nilakshi. That was quite a warm introduction. And with that energy, I welcome the panel here as well and hope we have a very high energy and a very, very enriching discussion today. And as we all know, I mean, the topic itself is so interesting, and hence we have you all here, sharing the thoughts. And often we find ourselves in this increasingly dynamic environment with rapid technological advancements, demographies, ever-changing, shifting priorities, right? And then to talk about something like sustainability in this kind of an environment is very, very interesting and intriguing. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. And maybe let me just start with the first question that, I thought would be an interesting one to, ignite all of you. As I said, that this is the workforce. Consistently, we are seeing priorities being shifted year on year, and sometimes maybe, in 1 year, so many times, right? From work-life balance, mental well-being, all these things which are now emerging as, the true forefront kind of themes, which was perhaps unheard of, say, a decade earlier. Like, we were not really talking about mental well-being so openly and at workplace, more importantly, as we are today, right? So how do we build this resilient workforce with sustainable HR practices, both socially and professionally? That, I want to kind of hear some thoughts from all of you. And let's start with Mohana, you first.
Yeah, you can hear me, right? I think you can.
We can, yes.
Sure. I mean, first of all, it's really Nimisha and the panel. It's really about acknowledging the fact that there is a need to do something about this, right? Because we see such a dynamic world, we see such a volatility in terms of how businesses and strategies are put together. Are our workforce really capable? Have we done enough as an organization, or the market itself is doing enough to actually ensure that people are capable to navigate through these changes? So resilience is extremely important from multiple aspects, right? It needs to be looked at holistically. So the first is the responsibility of the organization, and the other aspect is the resilient workforce itself, right? Which is very symbiotic in its relationship, and that's how it should be. My take on it is, I would like to start by analyzing what's really happening recently from an organization's lens. Our organizations, in order to build resilience in workforce, doing the right thing, doing the basics right, we see at a very surface level, right? So much is done to attract talent. So much is done to keep talent, which is largely knee-jerk, be it retention strategies, be it doling out so much of your perks, your joining kits, expensive goodies. And then suddenly there's this market downturn, which is a little and not huge in terms of its impact, and everything's taken away. So everything you did as an organization beyond your own growth and capability. And I see a lot of growing organizations spending a lot to attract, right? So even from that perspective, what are we doing to the workforce that needs to be resilient, needs to have the basics and hygiene right? So I want to start with a positive criticism for us to consider from an organization side. Is this the right approach for us to really think about building resilience itself by attracting talent in the manner that we do? So can we actually instead look at, diametrically looking at, yes, you can give all of these things at the right stage of your maturity and growth and affordability, but have honest conversations on job enrichment, on attracting people towards the purpose, and ensure their hygiene factors of pay as well as what kind of positioning in the organization they really get, so that both the employee who joins and chooses to join you for all that you said you are, and the organization's brand is not impacted negatively. Now, on the other side, building resilience of workforce is so multifold in nature, right? It starts with how we set their goals. And I'm sure the other panelists would agree that today's world is all about dynamic goal setting as a concept, where we need to allow and recognize and reflect and reward the fact that people were capable to actually navigate well through all the changes that they experience from what companies take decisions about. So a lot of people always come back and tell me that, Mohana, my performance was actually good. It didn't reflect all the effort I put in because, goals always change and the management kept changing the goals, right? So we've heard this time and again with large and growing organizations. So What can we do to bring in the concept of actually dealing with goals which are changing, and bring new age concepts to support people so they're resilient in terms of their performance itself? And I think that's really one of the most important core aspects that organizations need to consider and people need to consider to sort of hone and develop themselves towards. The other aspect that you just mentioned, right, Nimisha, is anything we do in companies needs to be current. It needs to be socially reflecting of what's happening today outside in the world, right? So are our policies at the basic level, are they inclusive? Do we have the right policies? And I always look at policies and practices because it's walking the talk for an organization. And we're not just doing everything else that's a frill, but not really having policies which are inclusive. And that creates a lot of resilience. It gives options to people to choose different types of policies to engage further and be committed and inspired in organizations, right? And that's a key approach to actually building resilience within a human being as well in the kind of system they operate in. So doing the basics really well, giving people opportunities to move within an organization. With so much changing, I think a lot of people come, in my role and they constantly tell me, how can I contribute, Mohana? Especially in growing organizations, they want different opportunities beyond their roles. They want to navigate, within the organization to do more complex work, enriched work. These are core, these are basics, and they're timeless. From the time that we have started working, I'm sure internal job posts, referrals, all of these things are the hygiene factors which actually keep people engaged, give the right opportunities, and help people navigate based on the skills that they also need to display with an organization. And last and importantly, one of the things that we have also tried to do is in today's world with so much around emotional well-being, mental well-being, so many things changing around you, and you're constantly under that little bit of pressure. How can an organization lean in and help people be resilient from a well-being perspective, right? So we actually adopted well-being for all. So these will emerge as common communities of practice also possibly, right? We've just started it. So I always think about, I'm a human being in the system. So what can I do and what can my organization do to ensure that I'm feeling well and have a holistic well-being? These are a few aspects I wanted to touch upon. And I'd love to hear my fellow panelists' views as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Mona, and very well, relevant points made there. Vijay, you are the CEO of your firm, right? It's not always, the HR lens that perhaps you are applying when you are taking decisions, right? How is it at your end, and how do you really look at this world today where there are so many sometimes contradicting forces at play? So how do you deal with that?
Sure. So yeah, although I'm not a HR person, but I believe,
You don't have to be sorry about it, but
right. No, it's a very relevant, question you raised. Right? So HR and business, goals and how they look at talent, I think they should not be any different at all. The more you actually find your business leaders being empathetic and understand, sustainability of a talent, the better the organization would be doing in business as well. So I really believe in that. So happy to share my perspective on this. What I can present the perspective like in general, the generations that have been coming, every 10 years, there was a generation gap. But what I'm noticing is that generation gap is happening now every 2 years. And like the PK has mentioned, the people that are coming in, the youngsters, they're much more aware. They're much more, creative and has more access to information. If I have to compare with my generation, we were not as much conscious about what was going on outside in the world. I really believe the youngsters are much smarter than a lot of leaders that come from a generation behind. And that creates a great gap there, right? So I think if leaders are to actually manage the current generation VUCA world, the significant piece that I think is important is that they need to unlearn and actually be open about observing and being receptive to the younger generation. So they might have these, they may not have the maturity or exposure of having seen years of life, but the amount of exposure they have had to information they definitely need attention. They do not, unlike the previous generation ones, the current generation ones, they don't expect leaders to sit in their rooms, in a high-handed, behavior, right? So they actually see people who are approachable are the ones who they follow. They expect that if they post something on a social media to a CEO, the CEO has to respond, right? That's the current generation's expectation. Now, to meet that kind of an expectation, it is imperative that the leaders actually step down, be working close to the people on the floor, being able to establish that connect. I think these are all very important traits to be able to make that connect to the current generation people. And humility, I believe, is one aspect that I've always found that it actually wins a lot of wars without any fight, and it wins a lot of hearts, without actually, a lot of effort as well. I think those are the traits that I would mention are essential to be able to handle the VUCA. In respect to startups, what we do is there is uncertainty all across, right? There's uncertainty of a career, uncertainty of, there may be layoffs happening within a startup, but you still have to carry the people to moving towards another goal. So the way to do that is actually to create a common enemy, right? So for me, it could be like in that country, there's that competitor who's actually eating away our market, right? So create a fear, create a sense of urgency towards that, and make that the primary problem, and not the problem of whether my job is going to be here or not. As much as we create this common sense of fear, I believe people will rally towards that one common enemy, whether it is their enemy or our nation enemy, right? I think these are the kind of traits that if we can actually nurture within an organization, it creates a reasonably healthy camaraderie between them, and they will slowly start identifying themselves with our nation purpose.
Sure. Mona, I would also like you to touch upon the fact of how culture plays a role here. Like, one is, of course, the kind of skill that the leaders are bringing onto the table and how they are continuously adapting. But sometimes when we talk about culture, perhaps that is in somewhere in the ethos of the firm, right? And maybe that's not really changing. In fact, I would say to a large extent, it doesn't really change. It may have different interpretations or, sometimes meanings attached to from different people. But overall, for example, I'll just give you an example of, say, Tata's being known for their, high standards of ethics and integrity and, things. So how do you really feel that the leadership, in conjunction with this whole culture that they build for the firm, make themselves then, very sustainable for the young generation?
No, absolutely. I mean, what PK also suggested is that at the core of it, for any organization, and for organizations that probably have begun, and in the first few years, they may not really focus on it. But we have seen time and again that culture plays the most core role. What is culture? It's ultimately how we achieve what we achieve, right? It's really how we behave with each other. And both the fellow panelists very simply said, it matters. Right? It's not about, it's from the time we welcome someone to thank them when they're leaving, be it a layoff or not. It is how we do what we do. And I think as companies get more scale, right, they get more complex. So your behaviors, your common behaviors, your values, they actually embed certain ways of doing what you do. And that's very crucial in terms of how you actually grow for the future as well. So culture is, you can define it in many ways. Every organization has its own set of behaviors, or Google, for example, had what they won't do, right? But it's very crucial that you commonly understand how you achieve that vision as well. So it certainly matters a lot, because people join you for that culture as well. And people leave you because of the culture that is displayed as well, largely. So I think both are important. Leaders actually have to learn the ability to contextualize a lot more, especially in organizations like Keka or BetterPlace, where I am. Every day your decisions are probably going to be evolving, right? So your leaders have to show the ability to operate through your culture and the need of the customer to actually contextualize your decision making. So a lot of letting go. So for example, your culture should be so supportive that what you achieved yesterday You need to emotionally be able to and equipped to let it go also, so I can pivot and start something new. So the entire culture of beginner's mindset should start from the leadership itself, because everybody else is watching you. So you're playing a very, very pivotal one-to-many relationship role in the organization. And your culture should really support, especially in a dynamic VUCA kind of setup in growing organizations. It has to really be honing right from the start a learner mindset, right? Are people open to learning? The tendency for people to actually go and grab and learn a new functional skill which is relevant, that is the kind of environment you should create, because every day, that is the collapse of generations that Vijay just talked about, right? People have information. So can I, as an organization, through my culture, ensure the leaders are learning all the time? So that's percolating down to the organization. And do you have a culture of learning? And ultimately, I think you can't function anymore in a world. And I've seen companies which are larger, worked in larger companies, now a much smaller company. Resistance is actually experienced through hierarchy. So culture of hierarchy, it's certainly not going to help you run faster. So how can leaders have the culture, or your company create a culture of leaders where they partner and not have a boss mentality? And the newer generations, and the other day we were talking, right, Nimisha, together, a bigger company can have about 5 generations, and a smaller company at minimum will have 3 generations working together. So how are you going to successfully as a leader operate when people are your peers, but they are maybe even 5-10 years lesser experience, but know the same thing that you do? So a lot of contextualization, partnership, collaboration, this is what the culture needs to be for us to drive businesses successfully in a multi-generational workforce altogether. So these are some of the perspectives that come to my mind to share.
Yeah, very, very well said. And I'm glad that the way, so many diverse points are coming on the table. I'm sorry, I have this bad cold, so quite embarrassing to keep, fiddling with my nose. The last question that, of course, we spoke about changing, goals and all of that. But ultimately, as this function that we have, whether you are reporting it as, a business leader, as the CEO, or as the CHRO or head of the function, you still have to define your metrics, right? What are those metrics that, sustainability, for example, and since we are talking about that, how do we really measure the impact of sustainability in the HR function? How do we really define our function priorities from a sustainability scale that, this is something that is going to go at least for this much time, or there is no predictability. And as you said, that the goalposts keep shifting. And then in that sense, sometimes you feel then that as an HR function, what is the impact I have made? Because my goalpost is always shifting. You're just chasing a target which is always moving, right? So what are those metrics that as we leaders should really lean on, which are sustainable enough for us to kind of, show some impact?
Okay, maybe I'll quickly
yes,
go.
Mona, since you're unmuted, yes.
I love adoption of or the attempt to adopt lead indicators than lag indicators. A lot of organizations, and most of us, look at lag indicators, right? After everything's done, then you go and check. But how do we run in parallel, or how do we look at some of them which are actually predictive in nature? So one of the key examples that I always urge organizations to consider is your employee reference. Through all that volatility, change, there are a number of people who choose to stay back, and they keep inviting their friends and family, right? So that's actually, it's leading to you understanding as an organization that something's also right, and people are actually inspired to bring others. It's a lead indicator to say that they're engaged, they're going to be engaged, they're actually bringing in others. So these are timeless concepts. Now, the other important thing that I think we could try to consider as organizations really is your entire mobility internally, right? Even like Vijay said, even if you're a small company, how do you create opportunities so that it's agile, your system is agile, and people actually choose to work somewhere else in some other part and cross-functionally learn. So your internal job postings, your mechanism towards that should actually enable sustenance of business as well as employee engagement. So finally, what is sustainability from an employee perspective? For me, it is about them being engaged and being inspired, right? So they stay, they take care of their well-being through all the things that you give. The last thing for me is, I think it's the percentage of people who voice out. An organization should always keep tapping into, is 50% participating in a survey? Are so many questions coming up in an all hands? Are simple things like that, right? which are measurable yet so intangible in their power of integrating the voice of people in the organization. So time and again, we need to see how to encourage participative cultures, because as people voice out what they feel like they own the organization a lot more. And you need to, as a leadership, you need to also embed that, right? What kind of reactions they're bringing to the table more openly, right? So these are things that one could consider. They are so hygiene, they're so basic, but like I again started off by saying, Nimisha, that do the hygiene, do the basics well for the culture to actually sustain and be robust as well.
Yes, PK.
Yeah, thank you. I think, Mohana. I'm just trying to give a slightly larger context. When I call HR, for me, it is people, because there is no other function in the organization which is reaching to people who are internal, who are third party, who are also in the society. So when you talk HR, I think HR has a role to keep this stakeholders, all the stakeholders in mind. So one of the metrics which I would certainly look at is we have 17, 18 SDGs, and which are those sustainable development goals as an organization, as a team, as a set of people are focusing on contributing, whether it is on poverty, whether it is on good health, whether it is on quality education, on gender diversity, equality, or decent work, etc. So as an organization, we have people with different interests, and how many are associated with various SDGs, and what are those programs which are actually, it could be minuscule, it could be a big impact, and the impact assessment which we do on that. Second, when we talk about ESG and on a larger context, the opportunity for our employees to contribute their ideas, their knowledge, their innovation, their network into each of those scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and I was also describing the opportunity which are available in various forums. I think there is a lot which can actually be done. So I completely agree with Mohana on focusing on the lead indicators will actually accelerate the pace in which we take this ambitious goal. For example, on gender diversity, I can still account for the number of women employed in our organization. But if we really look at the number of hires, number of leadership hires as a metrics, I think we will have much more meaning to what we are actually doing.
True. Okay.
Right. I would put a diversity of age also, and diversity of age within small teams, right? So in general, in any function, let's say if you take a sales function, leaders tend to be more senior, and at the down levels, you start seeing that there are more juniors. But I think within the smaller teams also, if you have various different age group people, that actually brings in that diversity. Of course, diversity of a culture, all of these bring openness to a conversation within a team. Those are very important. The other aspects that I would look at is, are leaders talking about sharing, switching employees between the departments? If these conversations happen, miracles happen. People don't have to quit company. They can just quit department and join another department. So number of such job switches happening within an organization, I think, is a very good metric that indicates how healthy you are, your sustainability initiatives are. The other thing we started noticing, and it happened with us, was number of people who have left. How many are coming back, homecoming? We have had like almost 6 people who left and then who joined us in the last 2 to 3 years. And that actually started, creating a sense of, hey, where we are today, right? For existing employees, they started seeing that they're actually in an environment there where they can actually grow. And this is probably the best environment than what they would find elsewhere. I think that is very important, how many employees are actually joining back, because in India, particularly in the last few years, it's a rare thing that ever actually happens. And then the department level AMA meetings, ask me anything meetings that are happening, how often and at how many times the leaders within a department, it's not CEO doing, but the department heads doing. I think that also creates that's a good measure, because that says that any kind of a questions can be asked and they would be answered across all the levels within a department. So that actually creates an openness in the environment. I think these are the measures I can think of.
Very good, Vijay. And I really actually, the fact that you made it so objective, really loved it. So I think, yes, overall, I'm kind of done with the questions that we wanted to kind of put together and make this discussion as holistic as possible. And I think to great extent, we achieved what we wanted to. And I'm taking back a lot of learnings, which, of course, always the winner, the culture that we always speak about is something that we all need. It's always very close to your organization. It's always very close to employees, and and it always undoubtedly actually has always emerged in most of these discussions whenever we talk about whether it's sustainability or change. So that is something that a key takeaway for me again through this panel discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a very, very enriching and knowledgeable discussion. Nilakshi, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I must tell you, there is a gentleman with an emergency at work. There is a lady with a running nose, and still we have such an enriching and fruitful discussion. And I think that's the beauty of the setup that we're in. So my heartfelt gratitude to the team for making it happen. Some takeaways, some very interesting takeaways I have from this discussion. So I thought I'll just plate it. It's very interesting, PK, how Saint-Gobain has utilized or rather projected making the world a better home, right? The tagline that you're sitting with behind you, that is so reflective of your product line, as well as of how you actually make the world a more livable place, how you actually, kind of coexist, which is actually the key essence of sustainability. So I thought that was very, very thought-provoking and very interestingly done. The other key takeaway, again, for me, and very interesting one, is like we're all non-VUCA survivors who have been entrusted with the responsibility of dealing with a VUCA world, right? So, and it is interesting as to how all of us, with a certain amount of agility, flexibility, fast forward thinking, if I may say so, we're actually adapting to it so quickly. That's a beautiful change. And that's what makes us as a group, I think, very sustainable. And if the group is sustainable, as they say, every little home has a teacher, and they are the ones who are sending out the students to the world, right? So if collectively as a group, I think we are in line with what sustainability would mean for us at various levels of our age, diversity, whichever be the aspect. I think if we have internalized it at our end, I'm sure our colleagues, our peers, our leaders are also internalizing it equally well. And the other thing was, yes, you're impressed upon how the lead indicators are very important. And I think that's what most organizations, young and old, are awakening to, that it cannot be a reactive measure. It has to be a proactive measure. And I think most organizations are leading by, lead indicators than lag ones. And a few very interesting lead indicators being, what is your diversity equation? What is your homecoming percentage, right? How flexible are you within the organization, right? So these are very interesting and thought-provoking, and that's why I began this by calling it a very thought-provoking session. And how, I mean, you guys made it so truly thought-provoking and interesting. I can't thank you enough, but thank you so much for making this so memorable.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you. It
you.
was indeed a great discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Thank you,
everyone.
Nilakshi.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Nimisha.
Bye.
Thank you, Nimisha.